Aloha. This video is in response to Sara Suten Seti's video talking about flat earth. First off, I want to start off by saying I don't know too much about your work, but I respect that you're out there speaking your truth and talking about whatever it is that you do talk about. But when you start speaking about flat earth, then you're coming into another type of engagement as far as information and awareness is concerned, and I consider that kind of a specialty, for lack of a better word, in my work. So since you have put out some information in reference to the flat earth, I just wanted to share my perspective on how that information is off-centered, to say the least, and to just basically share another perspective from one person, from one man to the next, from one brother to the next. This information is not limited to some off the top, off the head sort of perspective. You have to actually go into questioning all of your reality and letting go of a lot of things that we hold on to in order to start to understand, overstand, and understand what's really going on here. So I respect that you said, I watched your entire video. I respect that you kind of prided yourself in going into this as your words put it, a virgin mind in interpreting. I see the benefit of going into a subject like that. At the same time, you're talking about science, true science, not scientism. And I'll get into that in a second. The scientism, the science that you reference, so-called science that you reference in your video, is actually scientism. It's another religion. So I see that your main two things that you reference in these videos are African cosmology and science. You actually kind of went in on people saying you need to go back to science class or something like that. But beyond all that, you seem like a very intelligent individual, and I'm sure when you go through this information, it'll be clear as day what's really going on here. So I just wanted to share my perspective in reference to, my own journey on how I've gone through this. Keep it short, and I know when more people start looking into this, things will start to be more clear as to what's going on here. So I'll start off with your first slide. The first slide was that I'm addressing right now. It's going to be in whatever kind of order that I had it, but I know it's kind of out of order than what you went through. But anyway, definition of flat earth. You spent a lot of time on this. The flat earth itself is not limited to the definition of the word flat. Just because flat references smooth and even doesn't mean that the flat earth, it doesn't limit the perspective of flat earth to smooth and even. It's not the smooth and even earth theory. It's flat in reference to its horizontal horizon, the horizon that is horizontal in reference to there is no curvature. That's what the actual flat reference is. So I know there's a benefit in going back to definitions, and yes, there could be a better word or terminology used to explain the so-called flat earth phenomenon, but utilizing the definition of a simple word like flat is not building up any kind of scientific evidence as to proving that the world is a globe. So that first thing that was heavily amplified in your video for a number of minutes is already null and void. So the definition of flat doesn't really matter. We're not saying that mountains don't exist. We're not saying that the depths underneath the ocean don't exist. There is a vertical depth to this existence, which is obvious, but the actual flatness that's referenced in the so-called flat earth theory or perspective is more in reference to the horizon being flat, and specifically in reference to there being no curvature when you use curvature math. And I'll go into that in a later slide, because you referenced that point, but really didn't go into the curvature math, which is something that will come up. It's a scientific model that is used by the scientism alchemists against the people, the NASA, the university system, to create this mentality of intellectualism that allows people to just shut their mouths and listen to whatever is being put on National Geographic, Discovery Channel, and all these fake professors that are out there. So first off, definition of flat doesn't even really matter. The next slide was horizontal means going left and right. This is the opposite of vertical, which means going up and down. Example, this sentence is horizontal. Again, saying the earth is flat, saying that the horizon, the plane of existence, the realm is, and that's largely where I'm coming from. I don't even really like using the term flat anymore. It's good to reference it because there's a lot of people who are comfortable with that. But my comfort zone is really this plane of existence is a realm. We are based upon energy, vibration, and frequency. And this realm, this dimension, which you go into very lightly later on, which I'll address in a second, this dimension does have vertical and horizontal depth and all kinds of everything in between. It's not one or the other. It's everything, including this nonsense that they're saying. It's just deeper than the nonsense that the scientism community is putting out. Basically, the university system, the colonial globe model, the heliocentric model was generated to create an idea of intellectual dominance over the indigenous and the aboriginal people of the entire world by generating these theories of relativity, these theory of gravity, these theories of the Big Bang, the theory of monkey evolution, the theory of basically your whole video pretty much hangs on the theory of gravity. And they'll even tell you, if you listen to any video where Neil deGrasse Tyson, which is the biggest mouthpiece for the quantum or astrophysics world, he even tells you, and he has to jokingly say, we don't know what gravity is. We can only explain what it does. So he's actually explaining to you something that he has no idea that exists. It's something that it's an anomaly that they've created a theory to make themselves out to be, that theory out to be some kind of law. But it's not at all a law. It's a theory. So, yeah, next slide. The sun as the center of the galaxy, not the earth. So circular motion of the galaxy. Once again, this is based upon the heliocentric model. I know you come from the sun-centered perspective of African cosmology, but it's not as simple as is portrayed by the mainstream scientism community as of today. Actually, if you go into the plane of existence, or the cos and the Commission cosmology, you'll see Nut. You'll see a dome representation. You'll see a horizontal plane. You'll see all of this stuff, and all of these images are mentioned in a lot of flat Earth videos right now, which you would have seen if you would have looked into them. But I go even further into saying that there's more detail, there's more information that can be interpreted by interpreting those ancestral images, not just utilizing them for a so-called proof of the flat Earth. The Maya, the Inca, all of the there's a number of ancestors who went through interpreting their own version of cosmology, and the actual plane of existence is horizontal. So that's not to say there is no verticalness to the horizontal plane of existence. Obviously, they had representations of the spirit gods for mountains, the spirit for ocean, so on and so forth. So there's connections there that I'm saying personally on my own channel that could be researched on a deeper level and not just commercialized by the so-called flat Earth community as it is today, focusing only on the flat Earth in reference to it not being a globe Earth. There's more there. There's a spiritual side to the science. The alchemy as a whole needs to be interpreted. This is my own perspective of how I interpret the flat Earth perspective. So, circular motion of the galaxy, any kind of galactic information that you're getting right now that is available to you is being filtered through the university system. It's already dead upon arrival because the math is bad. The math is based upon the colonial mindset of locking people into a mind control program that basically maintains the powers, the so-called powers that be, in the know, in the intellectual dominance over the masses of people. So the same way that the white supremacy is used to, in a sense, keep a ceiling over a low ceiling over the indigenous and the aboriginal people, the heliocentric model is used the same way to keep an intellectual ceiling, a holier than thou or more intellectual than thou perspective over the masses by generating these artificial laws and these artificial theories. Gravity is the main one. As I say it on my videos in the past, gravity is pretty much the god of the heliocentric model. Gravity supposedly created this entire universe. Gravity, out of the Big Bang, brought all of the planets together in a big ball, in spheres. Gravity creates so much pressure for stars, and gravity does everything. Everything that the scientism community talks about hinges on the theory of gravity. And like I said, if you listen to anything Neil deGrasse Tyson is saying right now, he'll tell you, he actually says, we don't know shit about gravity. We have no understanding of what gravity actually is. We can only explain what it does. What I'm saying is that their explanation of what it does is based upon their own commercial theories to begin with. So they're telling you something that has no basis, first of all. And the only way you'll be able to break that code is if you were to completely let it go and trace it back to its origins. The heliocentric model only goes back 500 years ago. Our ancestors are obviously beyond that. African cosmology, Mayan cosmology, Inca cosmology, Hopi cosmology, all of these cosmologies obviously predate the heliocentric scientism math that you used in your video. Well, centuries before any of this stuff. So, yeah. Next slide. You cannot circumnavigate the flat surface with edges. You can only backtrack your steps. So this was just kind of, I'll just go real quick on this because it's completely off. It's basically a defense mechanism slide that utilizes a narrow interpretation or a narrow observation of what is really being said by the people in the so-called flat earth community. This image that you used and the image that you actually held up in person in your video is a representation of a globe model. When you're talking about circumnavigating the flat earth plane, it does make more sense when the continents are aligned on the flat earth model. And you use the image to explain the sun as the center of the galaxy, and other slides you use that flat earth model. And I'll put up right now an image of circumnavigating the earth on a flat earth model, but obviously it's not going to work on the globe model spread out on a flat surface, because then you inherently create edges. The flat earth isn't based upon a globe being spread out on a flat surface. Obviously that will create edges. Obviously that will create some imaginary underneath that doesn't exist that you go into later on, which it's just a tangent that really has no basis in what we're really talking about here. So your circumnavigation perspective is also off in that. The next slide is, you can't, obviously an expansion of that from the vertical up and the vertical down. I pretty much already spoke on that in reference to just because you spread out a globe map on a flat surface, that's not what the flat earth community is talking about. So your whole vertical up and horizontal upside down, it pretty much doesn't exist in the argument of the flat earth realm. It only exists in your general understandings or general interpretation of what it is that we are explaining. So your whole vertical up and vertical down and upside down horizontal is pretty much just a theory based upon a theory. It's a theory based upon a non-existent theory. So you're putting a globe map on a flat surface is a non-existent theory, because that is not what we are saying in the so-called flat earth community or perspective. So when you take it a step even further to saying the vertical up and vertical down, if you don't explain that, then you're wrong. Then you're automatically basing yourself upon an imaginary theory. So that's totally gone. So the next thing is, what force keeps people and objects from falling off the edge? So this may be 1 to 2,000 feet. Now image 8,000 miles. So this is again based upon scientism math. This is again based upon the theoretical perspective of the heliocentric model. You're getting these numbers not from African cosmology. You're getting these numbers from National Geographic and Discovery Channel and Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye. You're not getting these numbers from the schools of ancient Kemet. These numbers are coming from the schools of the mind control program of colonial university systems. So the force of gravity is automatically null and void. And when you go into speaking in reference to this information, so your 8,000 miles and all that stuff is in reference to an illusion. It doesn't equate to what we're speaking about here. The next slide is, where is the depth, volume, and height? 8,000 miles from the north to the South Pole. You put these images of radius and depth. You can use whatever images that you want that look very scientific, but it's not going to matter if it's based upon an imaginary theory. these imaginary theories and numbers that get put out there by the mind control program of the heliocentric mind control pushers is exactly what they want you to do. They want you to science the shit out of an illusion and make this artificially generated intellectual argument based upon lies in the first place. So by you coming into this, questioning this reality in a virgin mind, as you called it, you have to use the math that has been given to you by the same slave mind control pushers that added to all the other mind control programs that exist to keep people in a particular vibration, in a particular perspective of reality. So your depth, your volume, your height, automatically null and void because you're using bad math, you're using bad science. The next slide, there is no way to achieve gravitational pull without circular motion, so they disregarded gravity in the flat earth theory. The way flat earth interpreters explain gravity is really talking about pressure and density. So once you go into the science of pressure and density, you'll really see that the need for gravity doesn't exist. When you understand pressure and density, the reason why things fall to the surface is not because gravity is pulling it down. It's mostly because the pressurized environment that we live in and the densities that is different between, say, air and helium. Helium is a lower density, so it rises. A metal ball or a bowling ball will fall to the ground because the density is more condensed than the surrounding environment. So it falls. This is why you have a feather that is very light, but it still falls because it is based upon some kind of density. It takes a lot longer because its density is, those feathers are basically airy. And the center of that feather is airy. Like the feathers of a bird is basically hollowed out bone or hollowed out shell. So, but it still has a density that is thicker than the air, the surrounding air. So it will fall at a pace that is blocked in a sense by the surrounding air, but not as much as a bowling ball would. So again, this slide with the truck and all this gravitational and you can put whatever slides and images you want. You can make it look as fancy as you want, but if you're using bad math and bad science, it ain't gonna damn matter. So the solar system, this fake flat earth map, which is a globe that's spread out on a flat surface, it's garbage. I don't really, I can see what you're trying to do with the truck and square tires, but still doesn't matter because you're not really going into the idea of gravity being invented by the so-called powers that be. Then you go back into the definition of flat. The curvature was never addressed. The curvature math needs to be something that you have to bring into your next. You said you were going to do a part 2 to your video. If you go into interpreting the flat earth in any kind of deeper way, please go into understanding their ideas of curvature math and how it doesn't equate when individuals see one city from the next. Me personally, I have personal experience with this. The same thing goes, that's the same question of, well, boats are supposed to go over the curve. So after a certain time, boats disappear. If you want to know more information of that, in reference to that, you'll have to go into the definition of perspective. And there's a whole bunch of different videos available on that, but it's basically the law of perspective will start to help you explain the idea of sunsets and so on and so forth. But from my own personal observation, I spent 7 years in the Army. I was working on a boat, and most of that time as a lookout. And when you are looking, personally, I've looked on the horizon with no binoculars and with binoculars, and have seen the furthest I have seen out with my own eyes without binoculars is 22 miles. Small sailboats, tiny little sailboats. According to the curvature math, you're not supposed to see something as small as a sailboat on the horizon based upon curvature math. So there are many videos that are available online referencing people using, I think it's like a Nikon 900 or 9000 camera that's got this crazy zoom on it. But if you look at those videos, you'll see that people are zooming into boats that are miles and miles away that you're not supposed to see based upon curvature math. So that just debunks the whole curvature thing. And once you debunk one of these things, once you like, for me personally, that's actually what triggered my going into the flat earth perspective, is because I actually was looking at stuff at 22 miles out and even further than that. Even radar goes even further than that. And when you look at radar sends out a signal on a horizontal scale. It's not supposed to curve over. It's not curving over anything to see those miles and miles away. It's actually just going straight out. So you have that, then you have your people with seeing your own eyes, then you have binoculars, then you have cameras zooming in, and so on and so forth. So that's basically debunking the curvature math, which is one of the equally as big as the gravity math that these scientism alchemists are putting out there for people to believe in. So automatically debunking curvature math, and then on to the next thing is gravity. And gravity is just an invention that these scientism professors need to maintain in order to maintain this synthetic universe that keeps people locked into these limited perspectives. So the next slide is a semicircle shadow of the Earth on the moon. If you go into looking at images of the moon, you'll see that the moon, that is not what we've been told it is. There are images online where people have been using telescopes that you can actually see through the moon. You can see stars on the other side of the moon. You get no information, you get no answers from the so-called scientists, from the scientism community, about what's on the other side of the moon, the science of the moon. It's not supposed to be, the moon is not supposed to be the size it is, because based upon whatever, the math just magically adds up to being the same circumference during an eclipse, which I'll get into in a second because you referenced that very briefly. But actually, I think it was on this slide. So in reference to the eclipse information, another theory that is being investigated by people in the so-called flat earth community is from the ancestral interpretations of other celestial bodies, other invisible celestial bodies that are existing out there, like Rahu and Ketu, which are documented by ancient, like the ancient Hindu perspectives and so on and so forth, and already having, I'll put a slide up right now that is interpreting this information. But this is all the stuff that we are opening up to in order to interpret what this reality is, not based upon what this reality has been told to us by these so-called powers that be, the colonial mind control program. You're still locked in, if you're using any of their math in the way that it's designed to maintain a limited perspective, then you are limiting yourself. So like I said, if you're using the math of National Geographic and Discovery Channel and Neil deGrasse Tyson, you'll be limited to the level of consciousness that they exist in and their intentions overall. So if you want to learn more about the eclipses, Brother Sanchez goes in deep on a lot of these. There's a lot of videos out there. You just have to look for yourself. So like I said, you seem like an intelligent individual. So if you start looking into this stuff, it'll be clear as day. But these heliocentric mind control codes need to be broken. There was a balance and an understanding and a balance of nature that wasn't necessarily sun-centered. It was sun-acknowledged in reference to the balances of nature, but it wasn't sun-centered. Heliocentrism is actually the sun worship. This is why you have the worshiping of Saturn, the dead sun, in reference to all of the commercial products that are out there. And then you have the religious, the mainstream religious worshiping of the sun with, you know, the Jesus program and all the other stuff out there. All this stuff is the same program. It's the same story being sold back to people. So the next slide, does this look like the earth is flat? Well, obviously not, because you got a globe model. So, I mean, I'm not going to go into that. Same thing anyway. That was just an expansion of the smooth and even. You can cut up whatever kind of images you want to prove whatever perspective that you have, but that don't make it right. So expanding upon it and asking questions will lead you to the obvious perspectives. But since you went into this without having any kind of deeper research into what we're really saying here, then you're really just going to generate some kind of perspectives based upon a very shallow interpretation of what's going on here. So images like this is just, it's nonsense, really. The next slide is the same thing. A picture of a mountain. How can the earth be flat with mountains, valleys, oceans? It's the same thing. Smooth and even without the oceans without water. Okay, a picture of oceans without water, obviously. Obviously, they're going to put this image out there with that curve in the background to get people to lock into. That's what I'm saying before with all these other, all the information I shared before this. This is a religion. Heliocentrism is a religion. Globe theory is a religion, and people will defend that religion just like they defend regular religion. It's the same thing. This is why these CGI images exist in the first place, to make people defend their illusions. All these images you're showing right here, oceans or oceans without water, mountains, disproves flat. No, it's just nonsense. Doesn't matter. So then you show images of dimensions. You have 1-dimensional, 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional. Like I said earlier, the observation of the plane of existence in this realm and dimensions and so on and so forth is being interpreted by many flat earthers. And showing an image like this is basically addressing something that doesn't exist. When we talk about flat earth information, we're not using this image. So this image is only used to corroborate your perspective. So this is, again, a theory based upon an illusion, an illusory theory, only to add credibility to this very shallow interpretation of what's going on here. So people who talk about flat earth are not saying that dimension, depth, and volume doesn't exist. We're not saying that we exist on like this basic interpretation. It's beyond that. So the next slide, because the three-dimensional Earth would show you volume in the vertical dimensions of the Earth. Once again, you're using a globe model, belief systems to explain a limited perspective. Next slide. An illusion without volume and depth, so you would not question vertical drop. Once again, vertical drop is an invention that you had to bring up in order to add credibility to something that doesn't exist in the first place. We're not saying that there is no vertical drop. Well, first of all, vertical drop is an invention that you created based upon an illusory flat earth model. So, flat earth, many people are talking about, you're not saying anything about the ice wall, the Antarctic Treaty, the flat earth model that most people use, which is a different map, not this map that's being shown right here. And the definition of horizontal is not proving, vertical and horizontal, all that stuff. Like, it's basic. It's really basic. So with 8,000 mile depths, next slide, with 8,000 mile depths, the flat earth would at least be a tube. Once again, you're using heliocentric math, this 8,000 miles, and in order to translate heliocentric math to a flat earth model with flat earth CGI images that are put out there as for the controlled opposition to use and just basically ignorant opposition to use, it's never going to add up. The math and the science will never add up. It's not designed there. So you can get an image with a whole bunch of numbers on there, which is another thing that they tell you, that the earth is 93 million miles away from the sun, and light speed means this number times a million and a billion, and all these they create all these giant numbers to intimidate people to not look into this information, to not challenge the information, that because it makes them out to be gods and kings, intellectual gods and kings over the masses. So basically what you did was you took their gods and kings perspective, their intellectual dominance over you, put a gold coating on it, and sold it back to your own subscribers as a proof that the flat earth doesn't exist. It's nonsense. Because you have to challenge the entire system as a whole. You have to challenge the heliocentric model. You have to challenge the heliocentric or the university system, the colonial program, the invention of heliocentrism, the invention of all of this stuff, and the intention behind all of it. All of that has to be taken into account in order to really talk about what's going on here. You basically only took the math given to you by the slave masters and sold it back to your subscribers as if you won something because you explained slave master math. So this tube shit and this depth, you're really talking about a theory based upon an illusion. So it doesn't exist. Next slide. What's stopping the oceans from emptying out? Again, you had to use an image to back up your own theory, which is just garbage because nobody in the flat earth interpretation so-called community uses images like this, because we are asking questions about stuff like Antarctica and the Antarctic Treaty, the ice wall, and so on and so forth. And even going beyond that, there are people interpreting it from an infinite plane. So you have the realm. This is where I'm coming from, and a mixture between the flat earth model and a plane of existence, which could possibly mean there's more land beyond the ice and so on and so forth. But for example purposes, in reference to this slide, this slide is just nonsense because so many things are just not taken into account. Next slide, where's the depths of the oceans? Where does lava come from that shoot up from volcanoes? So once again, you're using National Geographic and Discovery Channel math to interpret a perspective, a very general and basic perspective that has largely nothing to do with where people in the flat earth community are coming from. We don't say that we have all the answers for everything. We're just saying that there's so much information that exists out there that contradicts what's being told to us by the so-called powers that be, that once you decipher all of this information, it's pretty easy to see that these National Geographic and Discovery Channel scientism alchemists are full of shit. So all this stuff needs to be taken into account and seen for what it is. So when you see lava coming out of a volcano, that doesn't mean it's coming from a core at the center of a globe model. It just means there's lava coming out of the damn ground. You don't know where it's coming from. We don't say we don't know where it's coming from. But you wouldn't know that unless you looked into the flat earth information. So your volcano and lava stuff is just not, and not to mention the fact that the scientism community has only dug down at a depth of 8 miles or something like that. They haven't gone any further than that. So they haven't themselves proven that there's an iron and nickel and core that is bubbling lava that shoots up out of the earth every now and again because it just needs to create more land. No, they created, just like gravity, they created a theory based around an observation. Next slide. If the dome is only on the top of what is protecting the bottom from planetary collisions. So this is just another very kind of weird perspective. If the dome is only on the top, then what's protecting the bottom from planetary collisions? So that's basically back to this next slide, the slide before this one, which is not the model that's being used here in flat earth discussions. Not to mention the fact that the planetary bodies that are sold to you by the scientism community are actual globe bodies. They're dead planets and so on and so forth. So once again, you're using Discovery Channel and National Geographic observations to corroborate this very basic theory of, something hitting the bottom of the planet that doesn't exist. It's not a perspective that we're saying exists. It's just, that's non-existent. You'll see all this. If the sun is moving around the earth, what is keeping the rest of the galaxy in orbit? Once again, you're using the heliocentric model, and you're using a flat earth map that is not used you're using controlled opposition images. Every single image except for the I can't remember the the image that you used first to talk about. I'll put an image up right now so you can see it. Every other image, like this image that you're using right here with this cartoon looking flat earth with the sun on the top and the moon on the bottom, all this shit is controlled opposition. It's used out there to discredit questioning the globe model and asking questions about flat earth. So you're basically using the nonsense that's put out there by these slave master scientists. So once you try to add science, this is what you basically did. You added so-called scientific perspectives to cartoon images in order to make your observations more realistic. So when you ask questions about what's keeping the rest of the galaxy in orbit, you're not realizing that we're saying the galaxy is not what we have been told it is. The light bodies that are planets out there are not what we've been shown to be. Those are CGI images. So what actually is out there, and if you look into it even further, you'll see the actual rotation of the stars around the North Star, and you'll see how that math doesn't add up to what's being said. So all these things that don't add up. Next slide. If the sun was this close to the earth, it would burn up. So once again, you're using the observation of slave masters that says that the earth is a big ball of fire, and it's however million times bigger than the earth, and if it was that close, you're using math that doesn't add up. And you're using a cartoon image that is not used by the so-called flat earth community. So it just to discredit, you're using it just to discredit your so-called opponent, which nobody was really opposing you. We're just making observations of this reality outside of the mind control programs that have been passed down to us by the colonial mind control program. And they make these cartoon images so people will use this stuff. This is the image I was talking about in the next slide. So you use this information of 1.3 million Earths make up one sun. So yes, that is true in reference to the heliocentric slave master science once again. So it's not true in reference to the observable math that people in the flat earth community are presenting to people. So there's another observation that's just bogus. So if the earth is not spinning with gravitational pull, what is keeping the moon in orbit? Once again, you're basing your perspectives on the heliocentric garbage, the gravity theory, the theory of relativity, the theory of the moon being what it is that they've told us it is, and so on and so forth. Next image, you're using Einstein and Neil deGrasse Tyson math and images that don't add up. You have to question those. How can you cause an eclipse on a cycle like this? Like I said, actually, even with a cycle like this, you'll be able to still cause an eclipse because of how the sun and the moon are arranged. But beyond that, from my own personal observation, and like I said, if you want more information about that, look into Brother Sanchez's channel in reference to the eclipses on a flat earth model. He does a really good job explaining that. But if you're not questioning your reality beyond what's been sold to us, you'll never get anywhere. The earth is too small to produce any type of force to cause something as large as the sun to revolve around it. Again, who told you the sun is that big? Who told you we are what we are on here? Same thing. You just show another image about it. What does the horizontal upside world look like? So this is, again, non-existent. You're using a cartoon based upon a universe that is based upon a theory, based upon an illusion. You keep using this cartoon image. If the sun has equal light on opposite sides, shown as a wasteland. So why is it shown as a wasteland? So when you say why is it shown as a wasteland, you're looking at this image as if it were scientific proof, like it's actually what we are saying this is. This is not. This is a painting. This is a bad painting at that, in reference to a controlled opposition. So who has visually documented the opposite side of the earth? Really, nobody is saying. You're the only one that's really saying that there is an opposite side of the earth as it's portrayed in this cartoon image. So once again, this is a theory based upon an illusion. Are there people on the other side of the planet, and why not? What do they look like, and so on and so forth? This is actually a question we are asking, but in a different perspective. We are asking, are there people outside of the ice wall on other lands, possibly? So that question actually exists, just not based upon this cartoon image that you shared in this slideshow. So there could possibly be nations and other peoples out there. We won't know because the so-called powers that be have made the ice wall off limits. If you sail down there, you will be approached by the United Nations, these people who patrol these areas and so on and so forth. So yeah, this theory is based upon illusions. In the next slide, you would literally have to fly upside down to visit the opposite sides of the planet. So this is another thing that you kind of stumbled upon by explaining, like, the globe model. So basically, people who are flying in Australia right now, or walking around in Australia right now, are walking upside down. How does that exist? How does that? So anyway, this is this image. Like I said, you can put whatever kind of images together you want to explain whatever kind of perspective you have. But if your perspective is based upon an illusion, it don't make a damn nothing. It doesn't matter. So without gravity, how can you stand upside down on the planet? So I already talked about that. That's basically it. So well, I appreciate you for putting this information out there, because a lot of people now are going to actually look into the information that is available instead of approaching it, like you said, with a virgin mind. And they will actually start to question their reality, which is a good thing. So in your own way, you did a good thing from my perspective. It was just in a backwards kind of approach, because I can see that you put a lot of work into these perspectives. But like I said, if your perspectives are based upon illusions, theories and illusions that are designed to have a particular effect on people, then it don't make a damn difference at all. So it's basically all I had for this video. Let's see, I'm pretty sure that's it. Yep. So thank you for joining me. And until next time, from all my relations, peace, love, and harmony.